what are some of the unique experiences that your children have had at Post Oak that you feel are special to this school and Post Oak and Montessori in general?
Well, first of all, just the way the classroom is set up, where they go into the classroom and can choose their work, but within a framework where they can feel freedom and respect from the teachers, where they come in knowing that they're not equal with the teachers per se, but where they know they'll be respected for who they are, where they feel like they can ask for things when it's needed, where they have the flexibility to perhaps say, no, this isn't my interest, but this is, can you help me do this? Can you help me learn this? Where, and I guess that would be the biggest thing. Another thing would be just the relationships that they have with their peers, where it's multi-level in the classroom. So they don't feel like, okay, I'm an entering first grader, I can only communicate with first graders. They feel comfortable with older kids and with younger kids.
Do you think Post Oak does anything special or specific to encourage that type of environment where the children really are not only integrated age-wise in class, but they do seem to really socialize and work together across the different age ranges?
Well, part of it is that that's what's encouraged. I know from the start in primary, one of the things I liked so much was the younger kids learning from the older kids. And the younger children felt comfortable doing that, and the older children really liked that. It gave them a sense of confidence and a sense of they kind of know where they're going. It helps them, the older children, to actually learn what they're doing and reinforce what they've done. And so I guess that would be a way it's encouraged, but it's just part of the mindset too, that everyone comes in. And in a broad sense, I guess with the great lessons once they get into elementary school, we're looking at the big going down to the micro. And that's, we're all connected as human beings. It doesn't matter what age you are, where you come from, where you were born, what your primary language is. We have this connection, and so we're all going to work together to figure out how it works for us.
You have a little different perspective, though, because on top of having children in the school, you're also a therapist as well. Is there a different way of looking at things, one as a parent, but then also professionally as a therapist, and seeing how things are done and what your children or other children are taken away from the experiences here?
I'm laughing because the girls always say, "Mom, stop being a social worker, be our mom." And I guess when I'm at work and I'm working, I work a lot with, well, I'll call them adolescents, but they're older teens and younger 20s. And I see that they've been spoon-fed information, that they don't feel confident with who they are. They don't feel confident in going out into the world. They don't know who they are. So that's a question I get every day is, how do I figure out who I am? How do I figure out what do I like? How do I know what I should do? And I compare that with my own kids. I'm amazed that my children don't feel that way. And when I come into this school, I can't think of any child I've met who doesn't feel like that they have the ability to find out what they don't know, to feel confident, and even if I make a mistake, I can do what I want to do. And I think that's part of the worry that so many kids have that aren't in this school is, what if I make a mistake? Someone's going to think there's something wrong with me, rather than looking at it as an opportunity to, oh, I can figure this out for myself. I can learn something, and getting self-esteem through that actual process.
Is there a specific story or event or something that happened with either of your children where they've come home and talked to you about it and said, wow, that's really wonderful, or I know they're gonna walk away from Post Oak with that experience or that occurrence that happened to them because they came home and they told you about something and it really just struck a chord with you?
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. And I don't think actually any of those things are what they've actually learned, academics. And I do remember so many times, like Avery, who was in Errol Pinto's class, would come home and be excited about something that she hadn't been exposed to, for perhaps stories he had told about growing up in India or things that she was learning that way. I mean, that obviously I hadn't taught them. But more specifically are problems with peers that they've come home and figured out. So I remember in middle school especially, I think well, they were 1 year apart, so they both came home one day, and they were talking about how there was someone in their class who was kind of mean. And we talked about why this person might be kind of mean, and Avery said, you know, I think he might be kind of mean because no one's nice to him. So maybe if we treat him better, then he will be nice back. And there was absolutely no word from me on this one. And I'm like, you know, why don't you try it and see what happens? And so Avery and Elise and another friend who was over, they had decided that what they were going to do is be nice to this person and see what happened. And guess what? He became nice.
Now, what about as a parent? You've obviously been very active in the Post Oak community. As a parent, you know, starting from this experience being new for you at Post Oak, you know, and what have you gotten out of it as a parent and being part of the community, and what would you say to other parents that are either considering, you know, Post Oak or maybe that are here and maybe not as active or involved as you've been?
What I would say is trust the process. A big aha moment I had at one point was I was at a dinner with parents who were mostly of children who had only been here 1 or 2 years, and I at this point I think the girls were probably in lower and upper L, and these parents of younger kids were so worried about, well, what do we do? What if they don't get into a good school? We don't know how long we're going to be here. We're not sure if this will work for us. And there's so much fear that comes from, this wasn't my experience, so I don't know how it's going to work. It's what we know. And it was like this moment of, I just wanted to say, trust this process, because life is more than what job you have and how much money you're making and the traditional things that we call success. Success is really finding meaningful work and having a passion that you love and want to do. And that's what I think this school gives the kids, is a sense of who they are and to make those decisions about what they want to do that gives them meaning. And meaning is what actually brings happiness and contentment.
To that effect and who they are, there is the academic side of the school, but then there's also that encouraging the individuality and the working together. How have they become who they are through their Post Oak experiences? You know, what have they gravitated towards when they are given the freedom? You know, what do they go towards, and what do they tell you about?
They actually both have interests in I wouldn't say everything, but in a wide variety of things. And following up on the academics, I know it's important. I know that it's important to be able to do math and to know how to write and to speak a foreign language. So I guess those things are kind of a given. I also am able to step back and know not every child is going to be really good at everything. You know, kind of that Lake Wobegon thing where everyone's way above average. So I'm totally confident that they know what they need to know. But what they've gotten beyond that is if they don't know something and if they don't feel comfortable, they can ask. So if they're not getting a certain math problem, they can do that. And in asking how to do it, they are validated and think it's okay to ask and figure it out. Plus they get reinforced in learning how the math problem goes, as opposed to this kind of spoon-fed information.
Yeah, that to me is something I really have noticed a lot of with both of my boys, is that asking the question is something they're both really, really interested in doing, where there was always this kind of fear, I think, where I was growing up in school, where the teacher would ask, does anyone have a question? And nobody would raise their hand and say that they had, because they didn't want to, and they didn't have the confidence, or there was just no real interest in what was going on. But now it seems like, what I've noticed with my kids, and even other Post Oak kids that we've had at our house that we've seen around, they're always asking questions. You know, asking the question is almost the way of proving that they're engaged and they're intelligent.
Okay, exactly.
Already, not even they don't know the fact that they don't know the answer doesn't really seem to cross their mind. The fact that they're asking the question, it's like that's what gets them recognized as being, I guess, intelligent and interested, is because they thought enough to ask the question.
I guess that's one of the biggest things they come away from here is knowing how to ask questions and being a learner rather than just someone who sits and kind of absorbs it and then can repeat it back. And as I tell them all the time is, you don't have to know it. Why would I expect you to know anything if you've never been exposed to it? And you asked me earlier about my work. That's what I see with so many people who come to see me professionally is they're afraid to even ask the questions because they don't want to be perceived as not knowing or as dumb or stupid, because that's their big fear, when that actually then perpetuates the whole cycle of not knowing because they have never asked the questions. So now, since Avery is actually in a different school, what she tells me is, you wouldn't believe the kids who don't pay attention and who don't ask questions and who don't want to learn, who just sit there being bored. And one specific example is science. She always told me, oh, I don't like it, it's kind of boring. And she got into a class this year where she was doing biology, and she found out she loved it, but she asked the questions to figure out that she actually liked it.